Hi, Jeremy from US Speedo, your source for everything speedometer. In this video, we'll walk you through the necessary steps to remove your cluster from your vehicle and install your US Speedo custom gauge face in your Jeep JT or JL. It's simpler than you'd think. Let's start by going over a list of tools you'll need to perform this particular install. You'll need a cordless drill, a T9 bit, a flex adapter is helpful but not necessary, a trim removal tool, a 7mm socket. A tack puller is also helpful in place of the provided needle removal tool but is not necessary. The first step is removing the kick plate below the steering column. This is held on by clips. Gently pry using your trim removal tool to remove and set the kick plate aside. Next, we'll remove the trim panel containing the ignition and climate control modules. To do this, gently pry up on one corner using your trim removal tool. Gradually work your way around the unit until it is free. Remove the wiring harness for the ignition and climate control modules and set the entire unit aside. For the next step, we'll remove the infotainment trim bezel and instrument panel pad screw. Remove the two 7mm screws from just below the infotainment trim bezel. Then remove the infotainment trim bezel. To do this, gently pry up on one corner using the trim removal tool. Gradually work your way around the unit until it is free. Removing this trim bezel will expose the hidden 7mm screw holding the top dash trim in place. This 7mm screw must be removed to continue. Next, we'll remove the instrument panel pad. Removing this part can be difficult with the trim removal tool. We recommend using this technique. Starting on the driver's side, work your fingers under the pad until you have a firm grip. Use a good amount of force to pull the instrument cluster pad straight back towards you to release the clips holding it on. It is helpful to do this in a quick, jerking motion. Be careful not to lose the blue clips located on the side of the part. Work from left to right until you have the driver's side half of the piece removed. Move to the passenger side and remove it the same way, working your way towards the driver's side. When fully removed, set the trim pad aside. For this step, we will remove the steering column trim. To do this, first remove the two 7mm screws located on either side of the underside of the steering column. Then use your trim removal tool to pull the trim free. Next, we will remove the instrument panel bezel. Remove the four 7mm screws located along the top of the instrument panel bezel. Then simply pull the bezel free from its clips to remove it. It is now time to remove your instrument cluster. The instrument cluster is held into the dash by four 7mm screws. Once removed, remove the wiring harness from the back of the cluster and lift the cluster free. Let's prep your cluster for your US Speedo custom gauge face install. First, remove the 6 T9 screws holding the lens onto the cluster. Once removed, undo the clips located at the top and bottom of the cluster while applying constant pressure to separate the lens from the cluster. Next, make sure the needles for your speedometer and tach are resting at their start position. Mark those positions with a permanent marker on your OEM gauge face. This step is crucial. You will refer to these marks when reinstalling your needles to make sure they are indexed properly. It will be difficult to calibrate your cluster to read properly without these marks. It's also a good idea at this point to take note of the spacing between the needle and the gauge face. When reinstalling your needles, you will want to match the spacing as closely as possible. It's time to remove the needles. Use a tack puller, preferably, or your included needle removal tool, to remove the needles from your speedometer and tach. Hold the needle hub securely. Gently slide the ends of the tool between the gauge face and the needle hub. Use a rocking motion with the tool to gradually loosen it. Do not turn the needle or apply excessive force. Some models will have a cutout in the tach for the four-wheel drive indicator. Remove the trim surrounding the four-wheel drive indicator by pulling it up on it slightly. Remove your OEM gauge faces and set aside. We will now install your US Speedo Stainless Edition in your Jeep JL or JT cluster. Set your US Speedo Stainless Edition custom gauge face in place of the OEM gauge faces. Apply pressure on either side of the needle post to seat the gauge face below the retaining tab. Be sure the gauge face is seated in the locating tab at the top as well. Reinstall the trim surrounding the four-wheel drive indicator by snapping it into place. If your model doesn't include this piece, move on to the next step. Next, we will reinstall the needles. Refer to the marks you made on the OEM gauge face. Position the needle in the same position and push the hub down onto the needle stem. Push straight down. Be careful to leave room between the needle hub and the gauge face. Make sure the needle is in the same relative position as previously marked. The needle can be rotated counterclockwise until it hits the desired start position you previously marked on your OEM gauge face. Remove any debris from your gauge face surface and reattach the lens to the cluster. Reinstall your lens and replace the 6 T9 screws at the back of the cluster. Your cluster is now ready to be reinstalled in your vehicle. Follow the steps outlined in the cluster removal section in reverse order. We will now install your US Speedo Daytona Edition gauge face in your Jeep JL or JT cluster. Set your US Speedo Daytona Edition custom gauge face in place of the OEM gauge faces. Apply pressure on either side of the needle post to seat the gauge face below the retaining tab. Be sure the gauge face is seated in the locating tab at the top as well. Reinstall the trim surrounding the four-wheel drive indicator by snapping it into place. If your model doesn't include this piece, move on to the next step. Next, we will reinstall the needles. Refer to the marks you made on the OEM gauge face. Position the needle in the same position and push the hub down onto the needle stem. Push straight down. Be careful to leave room between the needle hub and the gauge face. Make sure the needle is in the same relative position as previously marked. The needle can be rotated counterclockwise until it hits the desired start position you previously marked on your OEM gauge face. Remove any debris from your gauge face surface and reattach the lens to the cluster. Reinstall your lens and replace the 6 T9 screws at the back of the cluster. Your cluster is now ready to be reinstalled in your vehicle. Follow the steps outlined in the cluster removal section in reverse order. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for other great speedometer related content. For more help with your install or questions about this or any other US Speedo product, contact us Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern at 810-244-0909 or by email at sales@usspeedo.com. Follow us on social media at US Speedo for product releases, stock updates, and more.